And I'm going to point to some specific reports that came out just this past week, how specifically, uh, even though wages have risen for most folks, they're poorer than ever. They're running into debt because they're not able to keep up on their payments, and the mounting cost of energy and food bills and insurance costs and everything else. And at the same time, the largest corporations are also canceling Christmas. And I'm not saying that to be funny. You're seeing such a stark difference this year in consumer spending, and particularly with some of the large companies that are getting ready for Christmas. Many of them are canceling billions of dollars in orders because, we're talking a year ago coming into late 2021 where a lot of these companies were really worried about their number one concern being able to have enough product on the shelves because getting materials and getting supply to sell to people was a tricky spot. Now we're having Walmart, Target, all these companies canceling orders. And we had FedEx come out last Friday say, this is global and it's bad. So today we're going to break into that. But real quick, if you would do me a favor and hit that like button, means a ton to me for you to do that. And also it's free. You can take it back at the end of the video if you need to. And subscribe to the channel if you'd like more content, a macro view of the economy as it affects housing. But let's get started. Surprise, surprise, homebuilder sentiment fell in September, 3 points over prior month. This is 9 months straight where homebuilders have absolutely been freaking out about this market. It's been going straight down. In fact, it's getting very, very close to some of the lowest points recorded in May of 2014, meaning this is about an 8-year record low of how poorly that builders are looking at the inventory and traffic of their homes and their view of how good the market's going to be going forward. The traffic reporting that's going on in all of the builders right now is very bad. Month over month, it fell again going into September. Fewer people are looking at homes. As a result, a record number of home builders are now having to reduce prices to get these homes sold. Now, here's one of the first points I want to make on inflation. You got to understand right now, as these builders are trying to offload all these homes that they own, inflation is still pushing the price of everything. So you have two, forces going in two different directions. On one hand, you have the Fed raising interest rates. On the other hand, they're doing it very slowly, which in turn is not really dropping prices very quick, not at least when you see the history of how we fought inflation before. Interest rates nowhere moving where it needs to be to actually get control prices. As a result, builders are now having to reduce prices while lumber and roofing materials and all the other costs to build a house is still knife to their neck. It's putting the pressure on, and they've got to find a way to get those prices down so they can actually sell the property. In the last month, we saw a record number, 25% of homes had a price reduction to get those homes moved. That was up from the prior month. It went from 19% to 25%. And as you can see, that while we're trying to bring prices down, the underlying commodities are not dropping in price. So consumers are demanding a lower price, but the people that are actually moving these products, like the home builders, they can't afford to reduce them. They're just in them so deep that it's breaking them. Brings us to the OpenDoor idea. So OpenDoor is another massive home flipper. They lost money on nearly half the homes they sold last month, amounting to hundreds of millions of dollars in losses. They're just buying properties, they can't sell them, and they're deep in those properties. And that review was done based on what they paid for them and what they sold them for. And so when you look at how, why is the housing market gone so still? Okay. Why is the housing market gone so still? Further on the building side in August, we saw home builders permitting crashed. There is a very, very low volume of permitting. Obviously, builders are very, very negative on starting new projects when they're getting hung on the old ones. On the other hand, some of the bright news for the housing market last month was that housing starts did jump. You say, well, didn't you say permits are down? Yeah, but housing starts were heavily fueled by multifamily property. Multifamily property starts were rolling forward last month, and I was around 30% of all the activity just came from multifamily alone, which is trying to solve the need for ever necessary rental property. But I do not think that's going to live very long. If you look at the economy, you look at what's going on with cap rates and how much money these builders are making once they develop the building, they rent the property out. Cap rates are very tight in these particular products. They're 3, 4, 5, 6%. Well, now you're seeing the Fed as they're pushing up the interest rates. Bond yields are going up. So basically, you could put money in a bond yield now, make 3.5, close to 4%. Probably not before long. It's going to be 4%, maybe even more. And you can basically make that money by sitting on your couch and doing nothing. You have zero risk. It's backed by the federal government, which is kind of laughable, right? We have a currency that is a fiat currency that's really backed by nothing, but we're sure they're gonna be good for it, right? But the point I'm making is there's going to be a breaking point really soon when the cap rate you can make by developing multifamily property and the actual return you can make just by investing in something very solid and safe is going to be in competition with one another, which I think is going to have an impact on our economy as it results to investors getting in and continuing to buy rental property. And also think about all the investment properties that have already been purchased by Wall Street. Wall Street, a lot of these monies that have been borrowed to put in these properties by these large property owners that have purchased multiple units of investment real estate all across the country, thousands upon thousands of homes that are just leased out. The day is going to come when those loans are going to be called. There's going to be days that are going to come when the investors that are behind those loans are saying, hey, you know what? I'm really, really concerned about the housing market. I know we've made a lot of money and these bond yields are amazing. So like it might be time for some of that to transition. Now, you backdrop all of that, the new construction story, you backdrop the idea that OpenDoor is now losing a ton of money themselves as a huge corporation flipping houses. You realize that there is a structural issue in the demand side of housing, right? All of this has been really, the story solely has been focused on interest rates. And I'm telling you, that does not make enough sense to me. It never has. And I kind of want to share more of what I've been investigating against the US consumer and why people are so messed up right now, because none of the story about housing makes any sense. And I'll tell you why. There's less homes going on the market, but yet with anemic low supply, prices are falling. That doesn't make any sense. At the same time, people aren't actually buying homes. The rental market is balancing in price. The price is cooling. How does that make sense? You can find those headlines for yourself. The reality is the US consumer is just broke. The US consumer is drowning. That's the reason why all these patterns of issues that really do not make sense really kind of reveal that there is a global recession. In the US, there is very deep concerns. I'm going to walk you through on exactly how much trouble the consumer's in. Much of it we don't truly know about because our own government keeps changing the definition of inflation and how we measure it. And we throw out things like real estate and we don't measure housing cost in the inflation index. We have core inflation, which takes out, food and energy. So we have these very odd ways where we truly do not know impact of inflation. There's a lot of other companies that do trending and we really feel the heat that consumer feels. But let's jump into this. One of the things that I hear proponents of our recession or people that say, hey, it's not really a recession, it's not going to be a depression, and the housing market's really not in bad shape. A lot of them point to wages. But one thing I want to share with you is CNBC covered last year in 2021 when inflation was arguably not near as bad as now. In fact, Jerome Powell in 2021 says, oh, inflation it's just transitory. It's not permanent. We will see it come and go. Okay, that's the way 2021 was. In 2021, the wage was actually a loss of almost 2%, the post-inflation wage calculation. Okay, so they actually calculate, hey, yeah, wages went up, everybody got raises, but your actual post-inflation wage, that means when you use your money, you actually have less of it because everything got more expensive. Now, if we lost 2% last year, what do you think we lost this year as inflation rages on out of control? You guessed it, we lost a lot more. Now, at the same time, we had FedEx come out last week and everybody on Wall Street kind of to panic because the CEO says, hey, we're really heading in some trouble. And then everybody's like, well, FedEx is in trouble. FedEx is connected to everybody. Like they're shipping for everybody. They're delivering for everybody. They're dealing with the consumer. They're dealing with corporations. And the CEO was really saying, hey, this is problematic. I know you're upset with our numbers. FedEx didn't do great, but we're just we're the cause of a wave that's just around us that's affecting our business because everybody is screwed. Walmart and other major US retailers are canceling billions ahead of the holiday season. A holiday season is typically the busiest time for retailers across America. So if Walmart comes out and says, hey, you know what? We're canceling massive amounts of orders coming into the Christmas season. It would be awesome if a reporter would come up and say, hey guys, what do you see that is causing you the need to do that going into the holidays, like because that's unprecedented. Meanwhile, we just learned that Target's also canceling $1.5 billion of inventory for their orders coming down throughout Q2. As well as Kohls, Under Armour CEO came out and announced something similar. And the reality is the cost of living and the paycheck to paycheck premise for the average consumer has been overlooked. It's not noticed. You can tell when you listen to the pundits and economists on CNBC and how they're talking leading up to last week's core inflation numbers. When core inflation came out and was doubly higher than the projection was going to be. They're like thinking it was going to be 0.3 and it was a 0.6 move. And then, before that, everybody was saying, oh, this is fine. Everything's coming down. I noticed at the gas pump, everything's fine. But most of these people are super far removed from how the consumer's doing. And if, a lot of the data that we have in complete data that's coming out recently, for instance, in the past week and a half, we found out from the Department of Labor Bureau Statistics, the BLS, said Americans spent more in 2021 on taxes than they did on food, healthcare, and education and clothing combined. Okay, so they have all these different group models. And the expenditures for 2021, kind of like in a family unit style, went up 9.1%. It was an almost 10% increase in 2021 over 2020. And it shows you, and again, this is the tax burden. Dump that on the consumer, on top of food, on top of healthcare, on top of insurance, on top of housing costs, on top of automobile costs. Then it's no wonder why the American public is absolutely done. They can't pay more. They're broken. And at the same time, you're going into a recession, possibly depression type economy where two things are moving at the exact same time. You're having a situation where the Fed is trying to fight. They're trying to push prices down. And at the same time, the suppliers that are in business with the consumers, they have no room to reduce the price. Everything that it costs them to get that to public, the gas, the material, the delivery, all of it is still high. Yet the consumer is now broke, demanding the price come down. You're going to see some epic failures. The business person that's caught in the middle of that situation is in serious, serious trouble. I think you can see this from what I've given you. But listen to this. If you need more proof that the consumer is in trouble, listen to this. This came out 2 days ago. According to an August 30 report from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, credit card balances increased by $46 billion from last year, becoming the second biggest source of overall debt for the consumer. So if you look at a consumer debt chart, it's off the charts. And respondents say that essentially day-to-day expenses are getting so out of control. Okay, you're living check to check, you're living check to check. As soon as an emergency comes, you're done. You're on a credit card. As soon as that other commodity that you need to purchase, your food bill just unexpectedly increased. You don't have any room for it. There's no room. The American economy, the consumer themselves are absolutely strapped to the teeth when it comes through. And as a result, American Express actually is one of the few employers that announced they're hiring. American Express said they're announcing 1,500 new hires to arm themselves before the end of the year. I'd imagine so. And the really sad component about all of this is when you look at the situation, when people are now forced, they're living on a credit card. They're using a credit card to get by. The credit card debt, as we all know, it doesn't just get paid off immediately. Not in a situation that we see ourselves in now, where the Fed is not doing anything about inflation, nothing measurable. But these people are going to end up with this credit card debt for years or a year or more, right? Credit card debt a lot of times is accrued when you're check to check strapped, and it's growing immensely because of just emergency situations. And the Biden administration and the government around them are oblivious to solving the problems surrounding the American people. There's no interest in dealing with the situations that got us here. So we're at a situation where, Jerome Powell is just putting drops in the little bucket to drop this inflation. When you look back in the 80s when Paul Volcker was running the Fed and inflation hit like 13%, which by the way, the 13% inflation measurement in the 80s would be around 9% today if it were measured. We changed the way that works. But Volcker went to like 20% on interest rates. He took interest rates past the inflationary number to get it reined in. We're talking about going to like 4% when we're measuring inflation in the 8 to 9% range. Okay, we're talking about, oh, can he get it to 4% and all this blood that's going to be in the streets? All the billionaires and all the pundits that are going on CNBC that are saying, oh, you know what, it's going to be so bad and the businesses are going to crush. What are you going to do? Are you going to let all the consumers in America go bust? Are you going to strangle them to the point where they can't make ends meet? Are you going to print more money? The dance has been danced. The situation is here because of what we did to our economy over the long haul. And honestly, when 2020 hit, I can remember talking to my wife early 2020 saying, man, we are due for a serious downturn. And I feel like COVID, when it hit, 2 months, I think, after we had that discussion, you realize that COVID was just basically an extension. It was just a magical timing of that to basically drag on something. And a lot of these things that you're seeing go on, our government loves to use excuses. They love to say, oh, you know what? Like, you can't afford food and gas because of Russia. We're blaming it on a war. We blamed it on COVID forever. But honestly, folks, like, there's been no reckoning. There's been no one being honest and just dealing with the fact that we have zero monetary controls. We're sending tons of money to Ukraine, printing it off, sending massive amounts of money over there to have a proxy war with Russia. And then our country's basically following UN agendas to drive us further into electric vehicle spending, green energy, the Green New Deal at a time when our country is absolutely broken. And if you look at the stats, the New York Times and Siena the college just recently did a poll. I don't have the data with me, but overwhelmingly people are concerned for their own livelihood. They're concerned for the future of being able to provide for their kids. There's not green energy is not the top of their list. The democracy is not the top of their list. These foreign wars are not the top of their list. And our government has their own plan, and it's shared this same sentiment. This is a global update. Like, I'm giving this update for us, but this could be easily reported in many of the European countries right now, in Spain. These other countries experiencing the same thing we're experiencing. There's a big disconnect. There's a disconnect between leadership doing whatever they want to do, following orders and following managed policy from groups like World Economic Forum, and following UN green energy initiatives, global initiatives, and essentially abandoning the people, and it's sad. It's going to be painful, but that's where we are until our leadership determines they want to work for the people that put them in power. But that's it for all the doom and gloom. Appreciate you watching nonetheless. Give this a like. Continue the conversation below. Am I right? Am I wrong? How do you see this? And appreciate if you'd subscribe to the channel and stick with us on the next video. We'll talk to you real soon.